Hi, my name is Joseph Ngari, and I'm going to talk to you today about the Windows 8 user experience and the Windows 8 platform. I'm going to cover both these topics at a fairly high level. For the user experience component, we have a full day training available online that you can take at your own time, and I'd recommend you do that, and I'll have links for that below. But I'm just going to give you a high level of the different components so that you understand what we're talking about when we go into other sessions. So let's get started. Windows 8 has this new modern UI that it has brought across all kinds of different form factors, including slates or tablets, laptops, and standard PCs. This new language is actually shared with our other products from Microsoft, including the phone, with the Windows Phone 7 and above, as well as with Xbox. So what are the components of an application? The first thing you'll notice is that the application owns all the pixels. So from the top left to the bottom right, the application owns everything. What's important about this is that you get to present the content you want to present in the way that you want to present it. And we're going to talk more about that later. But you own everything is the main point here. So just an example of an application that would have been built in the past. So this is an RSS reader that maybe you can look at and recognize. It looks pretty standard, right? So you have all the different feeds, like the Pioneer Woman, Closet Cooking, Just Bento. But you also have the actual articles themselves, vegetable terrine, thick or thin, what's your crust choice, a bunch of interesting articles that you could choose from. And then you have the content itself, which is, in this case, whether or not you like thin or thick crust pizza. So this is really the heart of it, right? This is the thing that should draw you in. But the way it's presented right now is that there's a lot of extra stuff that doesn't really lend itself to getting you into the content right away. As well, around the user experience, there's a lot of other things, like, for example, the refresh button, probably something that you're not going to do on a daily basis unless you leave this application running all the time. In any case, here it is, front and center. It takes up space, it occupies, you read it every once in a while, and it's not something that you'll probably be clicking very often. And then there's page navigation, so page 1, page 2. You can see a bunch of different data, like all the feeds have been showing, all the different feeds. You can see a bunch of different kinds of data, like, for example, adding feeds, something probably that, again, you don't do very often. This is not a bad application, but there are ways to make this application better. And let's take a look at how you would do that in Metro. So this is the application reimagined. So as you can see, it's very much the same content. We're now looking at the headlines. We have Pioneer Woman, Closet Cooking, Just Bento, and a selection of the different articles inside that might be interesting. And you can actually choose to select on this, label right here and dive into a greater list or a longer list of the articles within. But the key thing is that you're actually presenting the main point first. This is about food, and so you're showing the food. Instead of showing you words that describe the food, you just start by showing the food. This is what you're going to read about, right? Beer, well, Oktoberfest is about beer, and so there you have it. Let's show beer as the first thing. If it's about a sandwich of the day, the egg and chorizo torta from Tortoise, that seems like a perfect thing to start with. The other thing you'll notice is that adding feeds and refresh have been placed in app bars. And so this is a space that you get to control as an application, and you can add things in here that are infrequently used. So something like adding additional feeds or hitting the refresh button, that's something you probably don't do all the time, and so those are perfectly suitable in the app bar where they're hidden when they're not being used, just like that. As well, the application gets to benefit from the different charms, like the search charm, the share charm, devices, as well as settings. And we'll go through some different parts of these later in the workshop. If somebody wanted to share, for example, a wonderful article that they've just read, they could easily invoke this charm and share it with other applications. What's great about this is that you don't have to know which application you're sharing it with. And it doesn't have to be an application that exists now. It could be an application that will be written in the future. But if you support the share charm, then you can work with these applications that are share targets. So for example, if there's a Facebook app, you could use the share charm to share an article on your Facebook page. If there's a new social site that shows up later on and you want to share with that, if they implement the share charm as well, then you can share with them automatically. It's just that simple. So a bit of a highlight in terms of the different components of applications. The thing that you'll see here is that they're very different applications, very different looking applications. There's the RSS reader we just talked about. There's Tweetorama. There's a stock application and Socialite. Fundamentally very different topics, but they have some familiar things about them. The first thing you'll see is that they have this C-like shape, this boxish C, right, around them. And what it does is it creates this, and I'm using my cursor to poor effect here, but it creates this frame around which you know how to navigate. So here, you look at it and you can see that yes, there appears to be additional content buried off to the right. And so you can imagine then just scrolling with your finger, using it to touch the content and pan through in exactly the same way across these different applications, even though they're fundamentally very different. Here are applications that are putting content first. They're showing you the information that you need to see without a lot of extra widgets and doodads and UI elements that distract or detract from the actual presentation of the content. With Windows 8, we're making touch available in every application. All you have to do is implement using the standard controls, and you get a lot of the touch behaviors automatically. So, recommend that you just use, the key thing here is to remember that you want to be able to size controls for people's hands and fingers. So unlike a mouse pointer, which has pixel precision, fingers do not. And so making sure that you're thinking about fingers in mind, this will get you to a great start to building a great application that users can use on devices such as a tablet. There is a defined Windows 8 touch language, and while you can implement separate touch interactions, people are going to learn these specific gestures on Windows 8. So if you take advantage of these gestures, users will automatically know how to use them without having to learn any new language that you design for them. Animations can be very powerful, but they must be used purposefully. This is not for visual adornment, but it's for actually conveying information. What just happened to the information? Where did the data go? What is the next action? Those are all great ways to think about using animation. The built-in controls and the animation library can be used to great effect to deliver scenario-based animation. New devices like tablets can be oriented in different ways. So you can either have landscape view or you can have portrait view. As well, we've allowed for people to multitask. What you can do is imagine having somebody watching a video in this view and then getting a Twitter feed about that video or sharing it with their friends in this view. So users are able to multitask with two applications running at the same time. Now let's talk about how apps are launched. On Windows 7, you would go to the Start button and you'd bring up the Start menu, and then you would choose the application from the list of applications. In Windows 8, applications can be launched from the application tile, which sits on the Start screen, or from a charm like the Search charm or the Share charm as well. These are different entry points into your application, and so there are multiple ways your application can be launched and multiple reasons why they would be launched, and you handle those appropriately. Now, speaking of tiles, this is an important topic to cover. This is effectively the front door for your application. In fact, it's not just the front door for your application, it represents your company. So taking great care to have a great tile is well worth your time. Now, before there were tiles, we used to have icons, and we spent a lot of time making icons look just right. So and we recognize them for what they are: calculator, notepad, calendar, and mail. With tiles, we have an amazing ability to present more meaningful information to the user and draw them into the application. So here's an example of tiles animating. Tiles give you the ability to present relevant content to the user. When they're browsing through looking for some content, they can see something from your application that says, here's an interesting piece of data for you to consume, and this is a great way to draw people in. Tiles can contain information like emails, say, or even images and accompanying text. And you can also load multiple tiles, multiple sets of images inside of one tile. And you can actually get up to 5 inside of a single tile that will rotate and animate on their own. Now, tiles are managed via notifications, and so there are 4 different kinds of notifications. There's the local notification, which is handled by the application that's installed. There's scheduled notifications, which are notifications that are triggered on a specific date and time, something like a calendar appointment. There's periodic notifications, which occur every so often, every fixed interval. And then there's push notifications, which come out of the cloud. So this is, if you wanted to notify the user of a new email, say, you would potentially send a push notification of this new email that they'd received. So an example of notifications, you can see the different kinds of things you can change via notifications. But then there's also toast notifications, which are really interesting. This is just a PowerPoint version of it, so it's not the way in which they actually look or present themselves, but you'll get the point. Here is an application, the RSS reader, in fact, saying that this is a event that is brand new that might be interesting for you to take a look at. It's transient, however, and so this thing will fade away. And so if you don't catch the user's attention, then a great thing to do then is just update the actual tile with the same information as well. So just to cover that again, toast notifications deliver transient messages outside of the context of the app. Again, you don't have to be in the application to see this. To get the notification, you could be anywhere in Windows and the notification will be delivered. The user can use them to invoke the application, which is a really great thing. They can say, oh, I'm interested in that, and touch it, and the application will be launched. But it's important not to abuse notifications because the user can very easily turn them off. Contracts is a phenomenal capability inside of Windows. We've talked about them in the context of charms, so search, share, but there are additional ones like File Picker and Play 2. These are basically ways for applications to interact with each other without having ever known of each other's existence. They didn't have to know about each other beforehand, but as long as they implement the same contract, they'll work together. So, to close on the user experience components of Windows 8, the most important thing is to reimagine your application. Your app represents not just your device, but your company. And for more training, you can go to windowsuserexperiencetraining.com. So now we're going to transition onto the platform overview. To start, let's talk about what are the different components in the platform. So there's the Windows kernel, and then there's the WinRT APIs. And so inside of this is the new modern API that has been written for Windows 8, and it is what supports the new modern user interface. On top of this sit the development platform for you to develop your application. And so there's C++, C#, or Visual Basic, which are great languages to use, and you can generate the user interface for applications based on these languages using XAML. And then there's also JavaScript and HTML5. This is a new capability that's been added that brings a lot of flexibility and power to the platform. And the point is, if you are comfortable in either C++ or any of the managed languages or even JavaScript, use the language that's appropriate for you. You can do anything you want. You can do all the same things in these different languages. Now, some of these languages afford more access to the system, such as DirectX. You would need to write that in C++, but for most applications, you can just write the same application in any language you choose. Now, the Metro style apps sit on top of this, and at the same time, in Windows 8, there's still the desktop. And so for those of you who want to continue working in the desktop, the same platforms exist there for you to use. Now, a little bit about the way apps run. Applications sit inside of an app container. This app container acts as a sandbox for the application. So there is everything that the application can do is managed by the operating system, and there is no way for other applications to interfere with the running of your application. Now, applications make calls through the WinRT APIs, which then result in calls to the Windows OS. But there's some calls that are API calls that are brokered, And that means that Windows has introduced a new component through which the application must be vetted against. And so, for example, if you wanted to access the storage card, the application must have registered to receive access to the storage card APIs. And if it has, the application call would be allowed. Otherwise, it would be prevented from running. We'll talk more about that later when we're covering how to access restricted APIs. So when do applications run? Let's cover the lifetime management for applications. In Windows 7, the user is in control. They get to launch the application and close the application. As well, you could decide, for example, not to close the application. So the user could make the user interface go away, but you could have a process running in the background. With Windows 8, that has all changed. We have one application that runs in the foreground, and applications that were running in the background are all paused. So there's one running app, and then the other applications are paused. This is very important. Let's talk about the process state transitions. So the user launches the application, the app starts running, the application can get suspended when it goes into the background. You have 5 seconds to handle being suspended. Apps are notified when they've been resumed. So if the user comes back and launches your app or picks your application out of the backstack, then your application is running again. But while it's suspended, it could also be terminated. So it's really important that you're always maintaining state. And so periodically, if you're writing state out to local cache, then you can be secure in knowing that if your application is terminated after being suspended, it can be launched and you can pick up the current state easily. So some applications need to run for longer. Let's talk about what those applications are. There's the VoIP app, there's the IM client, and then there's Mail. So these are apps that need to be reachable consistently. And so there's background tasks available for these. The background task can execute across these different states of the application. It is independent of the state that the application is actually in. However, the application must be on the lock screen. So the user places applications into the lock screen themselves. There is a way for an application to ask to have the user place them on the lock screen, but the user can very easily remove them from the lock screen should that application not be desired. So use this capability carefully and understand the restrictions. A little bit on push notifications. Push notifications are notifications that are sent via the cloud. And so the application registers with the local client platform, and it gets a URI. And then it registers with a cloud service. And when you want to push, there's the cloud service that pushes via the push notification, the Windows push notification service, which notifies the local client's platform component, which then notifies your application. There is a way to have your data backed up in the cloud, and this can all be done very, very easily. So in the past, if you wanted to do this, you would register a domain, set up your services and infrastructure, figure out security and user management, build sync infrastructure, and then make sure you can scale to the many users that would be using your service. With Windows 8, all you do is this. You set the data via the roaming APIs, and it is automatically managed for you. When you think about what data you want to roam, make sure you choose it carefully. There is a limited amount of space available in the cloud for your application's roaming data, and so it is not really used for large offline files or large media files, but is meant to be really for small key value pairs that maintain the state of the application. The Windows Store is the way to deliver your application. Now, for device apps, they all must be free, and we'll talk more about the mechanisms involved in delivering device apps, and you'll understand why they must be free. And that concludes the talk on the Windows 8 user experience and the Windows 8 platform.